Welcome once again to another episode of Captain Council, second episode for this week. And as Adi mentioned, we're going to talk about some kind of organization, like international organization like BRICS, but in our region. We talked about South Africa in earlier on, and now what are we going to talk about, Adi?
Well, I think you're the best one to tell me, Haffiz. What is happening in
Okay.
KL? I heard a lot of road closures, a lot of big cars coming in, a lot of planes coming in. What in the world's going on?
A lot of motorcades, a lot of fancy cars driving in, especially in downtown KL, Adi, because downtown KL hosted more than 10 five-star hotels, and these are the temporary residents for the 10 country leaders for ASEAN Summit that's happening this few days. And I just want to touch on why KL, because they were saying like, why did we even build Putrajaya if they're still gonna do it in KL? So here's why. Because the Malaysians were complaining like it's such a inconvenience for all this. It's almost a week road closure. Why don't you do it outside KL, right?
How is your daily commute coming along because of that?
I'm not affected because we use different routes, so that's okay. But people who actually have businesses in downtown KL, I don't know how they think of it. It's 7 days. But the answer is, Malaysians, if you're listening to this, it's because of security protocols. Because all these leaders cannot be put in one same hotel. They need to be put in different hotels. Well, 10 country leaders, so 10 five-star hotels. And where can you find 10 five-star hotel in Malaysia? More than 10 five-star hotel? In KL. So it cannot be done in Langkawi. It cannot be done in Putrajaya. It can only be done in Kuala Lumpur. Hence that. Because the government would not do the unnecessary of road closure or whatever for unvalid reason. So that's the reason. Okay, that out of the way. The complaining of the netizen on the internet because of the traffic jam for this 1 week. But what's more importantly, this is the ASEAN Summit now hosted by Malaysia now, and Muhammad Hassan as the foreign minister chaired the meeting today because the country leader will be tomorrow. We are recording this on Sunday. Tomorrow, Anwar Ibrahim and his colleagues will be having a meeting. This is again the Muhammad Hassan reiterate about how unity towards mainly few issues: Gaza, Myanmar, and U.S. tariff. On Gaza, they still said this is we need to voice, ASEAN stand as ASEAN, and with Myanmar as well is the same because Myanmar cannot be left alone and need to be dealt very quickly as ASEAN member as well. And about tariff, similar message. The countries, ASEAN members, need to negotiate with American as an bloc, as an ASEAN bloc, rather than an individual country. So this is a strategy that I think would further increase our chance to get a better deal out of this insane tariff. But I would explore more on that and explain more on that later on. But what do you think about this 2025 ASEAN Summit?
Well, I know that you mentioned that Tokmat mentioned that there's going to be more of an issues-based discussion, but it would not be out of character once we have the prime ministers and the regional leaders convene for our prime minister, that's Anwar Ibrahim, to be focusing on the ASEAN Community Vision 2045. This is a timely thing and would cement his legacy as a foreign policy leader, because he, of course, he has an issues, but he always likes to put this under overarching frameworks. He always likes to think of grand narratives that shapes the context, that shapes the narrative, and tells us the way forward. Like with the whole Madani slogan, and then for ASEAN, Malaysia's chairmanship in ASEAN chair, and hosting the ASEAN Summit this year, it is the focus on the ASEAN Community Vision 2045, which is to build upon the last ASEAN vision for ASEAN's direction for the next 20 years. And is going to be focusing on things that our prime minister likes to talk about internationally, which is more about economic integration, multilateralism, digital transformation, equal development, climate concerns, and regional security. All the things that he has been espousing on the international community, and he would definitely be hemming in and doubling down on this kind of narrative to ensure that with all of the leaders and all the countries that are participating here, that it is all on the same page. That as a middle power, Malaysia likes to make itself out to be. It's to build that consensus, right? With all the uncertainties that's happening with the stance on Gaza, U.S. China, the tariffs, and I think in terms of a lot of breakthroughs, so we want to talk about breakthroughs, the Myanmar crisis here, right? So these are things that he's going to be parking under one huge umbrella to get everyone to commit towards this shared vision here, and hopefully develop the institutions and develop the three pillars of ASEAN to make sure that we are on the same track here. I think that is going to be the conversation and the tone going forward, especially since this is, in a way, for our Prime Minister, it is a very huge moment for him. I think it's a very celebratory moment for him. It's going to be a highlight of his tenure for this time around. If you know, we never know. So I think that's going to be my initial thoughts on it. Then maybe we'll go a bit more detail. But Haffiz.
Yeah, I mean, this is only the fifth time we host ASEAN Summit, Adi, and I think the last when he was Deputy Prime Minister, I think in 1994, we hosted. That's the third time. Third time, I guess. So you know, he know what it feels. But back then, he was not the one who chaired the meeting. So now he will be his turn. I just want to go back again. You mentioned about talking about how we gonna deal with the Americans. I definitely concur with what he said as an end block, but the devil is always in the details here. I would like to see if ASEAN can do this in terms of how we're gonna strengthen interrelations with inter-member of the ASEAN, so that we can go to America as a solid bloc. What I mean by a solid bloc is that I think countries in ASEAN that relatively better, economically speaking, like Singapore, like Malaysia, Thailand, have to lend a hand to countries like hit the most by tariffs, namely Vietnam or Philippines and Indonesia, so that it could be a better deal for us to say, hey, I'm going to help you out here so that you can go to the Americans, but you know, there's something has to be in kind with us as well. What I'm talking about is that if Malaysia, Singapore, and Thailand can reach out, and then in order to secure that lower tariff for all of this country, because we want to go as an bloc, right? Maybe we can also include a deal with these countries where, I'm just thinking out loud here, maybe we can deal with food security as well. Hey, Vietnam, I'm going to help you to talk to American as an bloc, but maybe you could provide some kind of agreement that food security, for example, is something that we're interested in. So would you mind, supplying us for paddy for, I don't know, 20 or whatever. Just kind of along the line of helping each other here, so that we can have every one of us have role to play, and we have this sense of belonging that, oh, I have a role to play in ASEAN. I help my brothers, Singaporean brothers, my Malaysian brothers, Thailand brothers. So now my brothers gonna help me in Washington DC to help to negotiate with the tariff. So this kind of a relationship, I think, would go a longer way as a mutual relationship between Malaysia, not just Malaysia and one country. It could be Malaysia, Vietnam, together with Thailand, in Singapore. So you can see it's a win-win, obviously a win-win situation, because Adi, ASEAN is one of the most diverse organization in the world. We have archipelago, one of the biggest archipelago in the world, Indonesia. So of course they have certain advantage that they have, but of course they have their own weaknesses. And we have one of the richest nations, smallest nation state in the world, Singapore. They have all the money, all the investment that they want, but they do not have, let's say, the land or the natural resources there. But these are abundantly you have in Thailand, in Vietnam, in Myanmar, in Laos. What are you talking about here? These are mismatch opportunity. We talked about JSSEZ the other day, right? I think in January or in February. In similar concept, Johor has all the resources, all the raw material. Now Singapore comes in with all the fun, with all the technologies. Why don't we expand that to ASEAN level? We already done it in here. It's Singapore already has the blueprint. Malaysia already has the blueprint. All they have to do is let's talk in this summit.
Yeah, definitely. I think because they did talk about sustainability being one of the key themes of this ASEAN summit, and sustainability doesn't just mean that we like to throw this word. It's the hottest buzzword to use when you want to farm brownie points and say, "Oh, look, we're very sustainable, we're very progressive, we're a very developing country." But when it comes to sustainability, I think what you hit the nail on the head is that how do we integrate these regions even closer? How do we integrate the economies even closer so that whatever comparative advantage are being laid out, whatever one is lacking, one is able to step in and assist in that regard, right? That is, I mean, you take the principles of, let's say, nation building, where each component has its duty, has its role, and how it contributes to the wider body, right? And I believe why ASEAN can do that is because that there is this element of consensus building and what they call the ASEAN way. And because of those principles and that ability to convene with one another, they can always find that middle ground. They can always find that negotiation. They're always able to talk to one another. And with hopefully this whole teams of sustainability can drive that level of conversation with one another. Even the other team, I believe, was inclusivity, right? And in the spirit of that, we were able to have the Prime Minister of Timor-Leste come over to the summit. We have Keira Lazadana Gusmao come to, participate, right? Obviously not as a full ASEAN member, but in that spirit of inclusivity in their attempts to become recognized as a full ASEAN member with Malaysia's support, right? To support the entire ecosystem, the whole community. It shows maybe there is that commitment on Malaysia's side, and hopefully that will be brought into the negotiating table, that Malaysia is not just to take that chairmanship position seriously, to lay out the tone, to set the narrative, to get everyone together. Because I believe most of the ASEAN countries are willing to work with one another more so than other regions, maybe to the same level of coordination as the European Union back then. So ASEAN still has that potential. I believe that is why our Prime Minister is so focused and fixated, ensuring that everyone here comes together to have a shared vision here. But okay, I'm going to add one caveat to this. I'm just going to throw it out there, then I'll leave you to your thoughts. I'll come back into it later. But I'm going to still say this one criticism I'll still have with this whole summit here is that there is always this, how do you say, capital-centric-ness to all these summits, all these ASEAN things, right? It's always held at capital cities or big administrative cities, right? It feels like we talk about sustainability and integration, right? But we talk about integration from just the perspective of like all these big capital cities and central governments talking to one another, right? But what about the sub-regions as well, right? Because maybe in Indochina, right, Southeast Asia part where like Vietnam, Laos, that side, right, doesn't necessarily have that much of an effect on us, right? So it's not really of a concern to us. Much like, I'm not going to say it, Borneo is not a region that may be of immediate concern to Thailand, Myanmar, Vietnam, all that. So this, I always find it lacking that we talk about sub-regions here, when a lot of these member states that we have are participating in very key and crucial sub-regions here. So I'll talk about that later, but Haffiz, you can go ahead first.
But I think I did in 2023, Indonesia did it in Labuan Bajo, I guess. In the new...
Indonesia's always been quite innovative in trying new skills together.
Yeah, because they were actually building a 5-star hotel there, and then it's just a very tiny island that security is not an issue, so they can pretty much control the entire island. So I think that's one of the reasons why. Because I think security has to be number one priority here. Because we're talking about 10 country leaders here. I want to bring in, because this time, Adi, it's not just going to be about ASEAN members. We're going to be joined by the GCC and China as well. China will be represented by the foreign minister, I guess, or the premier of China. So what is interesting here, Adi, because this is in the midst of tariff of China America trade war. So this ASEAN could be, because we're talking about ASEAN as an organization is actually second largest in terms of GDP. I think it's bigger, even bigger in European Union is the biggest, right? Or America is the biggest one. So whatever the case is, that we are one of the top on paper. You know, what is interesting here, that China and the Gulf countries wants to have a talk with us. So this is very, very exciting, because also just I think last week Trump went to the Middle East to visit a few countries, and he got 3.1 trillion US dollar investment from on a few Arab countries. And this is the kind of interest that we have, where multipolar world is coming to a much closer than we thought it would be, because China and Middle East powers here looking at ASEAN as an opportunity to pivot whatever that they planned last 10 years, 20 years ago, that no longer be Western centric. So they know the uncertainty about Western powers here. Even Europe is, no longer much a hope there. So they would rather to move, finally, what Mahathir said makes sense. The policy, look is policy, right? So for the Middle East people, let's look at ASEAN. They have a very vibrant the economy, one of the most, relatively speaking, one of the most peaceful region, except maybe Myanmar and Timor-Leste. There's some conflict there, but beyond that, all good. And these are the region that if you are as a trader or business person, business industries, you want to be present in this kind of region. So I think that's a huge plus point here. And yes, you mentioned Malaysia wants to make a mark on this ASEAN Summit. And of course, Anwar, as we know himself, he wants to make his personal mark as well as Prime Minister of Malaysia. So we can see how this would play into a bigger roles. And I just want to relate also again with Anwar ambitions going on his international trip. Now recently went to Kazan, talk about all this halal industry expanding on it. So yeah, Malaysia definitely have certain advantage here in terms of, let's just say halal industry, right? All this we can spearhead the conversation and bring in Middle East powers and of course China. Please, when we talk about China, there's more than 30 million Muslims there, Uyghur Muslim, Han Muslims there, that we shouldn't be overlooked. So that's where we could come in, Malaysia, particularly Malaysia, in ASEAN, to bring in more prosperity in ASEAN.
Yeah, I think when it comes to maximizing our relationships is also important inside and outside ASEAN, so that people would contend with ASEAN. Let's say when Russia or China wants to engage the region, they know that ASEAN is a main player that they must contend with, because that way the ASEAN countries all work together, has a singular voice, has a very definitive voice. But of course, now I'm going to bring back the conversation I had, which comes to subregions, is that when we look at ASEAN-led initiatives, ASEAN discussions, right, we see it in a way where it's led by the national level, right? Rarely do you ever see conversation at the you see involvement of a sub-regional conversation being represented at that national level, right? So let's say, for example, the man in Kuala Lumpur, the diplomat in Kuala Lumpur, right, focuses on foreign policy of the Prime Minister, right? Because by virtue of his close proximity to Thailand, he would be focusing on parts of Malaysia like Malaya, which is close to Thailand, right? And would sometimes might not include how this is involve Borneo, right? Or how does Borneo have interact with one another with other adjacent regions like southern Philippines and then the other parts of Indonesia, right? So it's this kind of conversation I would like to bring up, that I don't want to say it's neglected, but it's never really front and center when it comes to these talks here. And of course, we have other forums such as BIMPIAGA, being one of ASEAN's most tangible sub-regional frameworks. But the fact that this rarely ever gets brought up in national conversation, even with national level, right? Not even ASEAN level, right? By our leaders, right, is quite a missed opportunity for us to empower the margins here, right? Because you are only as strong as your weakest link. If this, the Philippines is also the same. It's very Manila centric, and it comes to development and empowerment of the just like the southern Philippines, which is connected very closely to us, right? That is a missed opportunity to develop and cultivate a stronger market over there for us to make use of. Like you mentioned, the halal market, right? We don't actually, like for us in Sabah, right? We don't have to think about exporting to China, Muslims, or Muslims across the world. We can look to our neighbors, right? Southern Philippines has a significant Muslim population that also has a huge demand for halal products as well. And this has been proven with the performance that Bimpiaga has shown under if we're believing the assessments made by Economic Minister Haffiz Ramli, who does chair the Bimpiaga Malaysia side for Malaysia. So there is that appetite for sub-regional bodies to be, to be more front and center, to be more seen, to be more recognized. So maybe in the spirit of inclusivity, I hope maybe that throughout these next few days that they will be putting it more front and center, because we cannot we can say nice things about ASEAN. Yes, we can say nice things about Malaysia being so visible and being very active on the international stage. But when it comes to, we has to always so be representative of the components that it has. Johor, I think, is leading the way with the SEZ, right? Especially in the zone, by becoming more active participants with Singapore. And Singapore might have to acknowledge that as well, right? When it comes to how they would negotiate, they would also consider that Johor is of immediate interest to them and policy as well. So it's bringing these areas more front and center so that they themselves can be empowered in their own right.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's definitely an opportunity miss for, I mean, at least for Malaysia, and not include the other. But also, I think ID, this is much of economic issues, because it's very hard to for countries like Malaysia or Philippines to actually expand beyond the capitals, because I mean, in Malaysia, you next to Kuala Lumpur, it's what, Penang or JB. But even then, it's not as equal as a KL. So, in terms of that, it's really going to be a hard one, especially when you bring in Bim Niaga. There's a lot of role to be played over there by Bim Niaga. And, just by talking about halal industry to our neighbors, Sabah could be like a mini hub for that as well. Like, because we're surrounded by Makassar, we're surrounded by, like you mentioned, southern Philippines, and of course Brunei, even though a very small market, but still there. And of course Kalimantan on the south, of course. So these are the things that shouldn't be, overlooked by our Prime Minister, other than just focusing on Johor, maybe more Malaya-centric, as you put it. I think that's it, Adi, for this ASEAN Summit 2025. This is a meeting currently when we are recording this. Is happening in KL. Be until the end of the month. So good luck for our country leaders. Hopefully, something more fruitful will be the result of this meeting. Also, I just want to remind all of you, if you like our content here, I mean, please comment and like and share this video, because it's really going to help with the algorithm and, the spreading the virality of this video. So, if you think you like the content that we put forward here, please consider subscribing. Adi, what is the next topic we're going to talk about?
Well, I talk about Bimpiaga, right? So I think that's kind of telling of what region we're going to be zooming towards. More specifically. Always it ends up somehow with us or Sarawak or even this region. So what's it going to be? Find out in the next episode.
Okay, let's go to Borneo in the next episode.